Good evening, you 3D printing maniacs, or as I like to call you guys, hot end maniacs.
Yes,
Um,
and happy hot Saturday to all of you.
it's
Is it hot
hot,
here?
sweaty, muggy. It's a little moist. I don't know if you can say that word moist anymore on the air.
Should I give a preview of how hot it is here in Calgary?
Yes, please.
We've we've evolved to more PLA warpage
This
on
is
the
what happens when
vase.
you leave PLA out in the sun.
Yeah, and that's with a point 0.8 nozzle. Imagine what a
Wow.
point 0.4 vase would do. Yes, poor Jerry's so sad about the vase.
Yes, she is. So I'm going to show this off.
Da 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 da. Because yeah, that happened today, didn't
That
it?
happened today too. Yes.
Yeah, lower myself to your height. There we
SpaceX
go.
SpaceX launched today. The what is it? The Falcon 9
Falcon
with
9 Demo 2.
Demo 2 with the Dragon capsule on
Yes.
loaded. So that was kind of cool. I watched that launch today. And I got to tell you, man, it brings me back to when I was a kid watching the launches and keeping all the newspaper clippings from the 60s and stuff like that, or the late 60s when they were doing that kind of stuff. So that little rocket that you just saw me use, Brian and I are going to become astronauts in the 3D printing world.
Yes. I'm going to the moon.
And no, we're not taking a psychedelic trip. We teamed up with PM Hobbycraft here in Calgary. We've got an episode coming out on Wednesday. It was supposed to come out this past Wednesday, but I didn't get time to finish everything I wanted to do for it. So we're going to put it out this coming Wednesday, which is actually pretty appropriate because we just had the SpaceX launch. First time we've had humans in space from the US in what, 10 years?
9 years almost
Yeah,
when
almost a
STS
decade.
135 did its final landing there. So this was amazing. I mean, Bill Nye, who had a little interview segment,
Hmm.
nailed it best. Right? Is that regardless of where this is coming from, there are more people getting into space. There's more ideas being tested now. There's more opportunities for advancements. So,
Yes.
that's what I'm focusing on today. As sad as I am that we have two astronauts named Bob and Doug, and there was no Bob and Doug McKenzie jokes, I will take Bill Nye and Shatner on the live stream.
Yeah, me too. I saw them both on the live stream today, and I had it running down here in the office while I was taking care of some stuff. But I got to tell you,
Yeah,
man, that was probably the coolest thing for me today. Just seeing that, you know, Musk and NASA coming together and getting North Americans back in space. It was a big thing for me. So with the space
absolutely.
talk, we're gearing up for two episodes. One is a primer showing you what we're doing with PM
Mhm.
Hobbycraft, and we are going to be building our own launcher. So here is the base for our own launcher. We're going to do as much 3D printed stuff as we can. PM Hobbycraft helped us out with a whole bunch of engines. So we've got
Yes, I'm
24
so
engines
excited,
here.
and I'm gonna try to Falcon 9 it and not blow it up like the other one happened the other day.
Yeah. We're
Though
going
I
to
might, I might.
we're going to an undisclosed location. And we are going to be setting these things off and we're going to have a good time. We're going to take you guys along for the ride. So it's a two-part episode that's going to be coming. The first part will come this Wednesday.
Mhm.
So we've got, well, first of all, welcome to the first layer. I forgot to welcome you
Yes.
guys.
Yeah, we kind of been rambling for 4 minutes about how much
Yeah.
we love space, as you can tell by,
Yeah.
stormtroopers and Richard's background. And,
Yep.
well, I don't have much right now apart from my head being in space from digging up a backyard. So,
Welcome everybody to our show this evening. This is our live stream that we do every Saturday night at 7. We've got questions that came in this week that we're going to cover. We're going to take your questions in the chat as well. again, I want to thank PM Hobbycraft for their support on this project that we're doing. They're a great resource for us. They helped us out with some stuff to get us going. I haven't flown rockets since I was 11 or 12. And Estes rockets, I mean, that's back in the 70s. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that was right around when Star Wars was coming out. I had an Estes rocket. My brother Raymond and I, we went out and we shot rockets at the Burntwood Schoolyard in Thompson, Manitoba, where I grew up, and we lost a lot of rockets. And
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, and you know, like everything, you don't take care of your stuff, you lose it, and you lose interest over time. But I thought, you know, summer's coming, and this is the time of year where we've got to, you know, with all the COVID-19 crap that's been going on, this is the time of year we've got to discover things that will get us and our kids out of the house. You know, get away from the TV, get away from the video games, get away from all the stuff that would keep them locked in the house. Let's get them out. Let's get them doing some projects. And there's no better project to start with than rockets. And we're going to be discussing rockets on Wednesday. We're going to take you through that and show you exactly what we did. And then we'll have a follow-up video where you see the right stuff. And Brian and I go head to head. He's got to print his rockets first. So,
Yes. Let's just say my machines have been a little bit busy, and my grand wisdom on the hottest day, I have chosen to print TPU today, right behind me. So
I've been
I'm
printing
marinating.
PETG today, so I know what you're going through. All right, so let's dive into
It's
it.
roasty toasty.
What do we do here on a Saturday night? Well, we answer your questions. We got questions in this week on our email, and we're going to take your questions tonight through the chat as well. Super Chat is turned on. If you want to get your question to the head of the queue tonight, Super Chat's the best way, because then we can, it comes up in nice, big, bold color, and we can see your question right away.
Chat.
Not that you have to use Super Chat, but it helps. It helps the channel. It helps to keep us going. Like, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe, and we are going to move ahead. Let's start with question number 1 from Nikolai Haddix. He says, I got a temp tower from Thingiverse. I tried to print it, but the temperature did not change. What am I doing wrong? Well, let me just pull up Cura here, and I will show you exactly what you're doing wrong. Let me just switch cameras here. Here we go. There we are. Make sure your audio is still turned on. There we are. So when you want to do a temperature tower, you have to go up to the preferences, or pardon me, extensions, and you have to go into post-processing. There you're going to see modified G-code. If you click on that, there will be add a script. What you're going to do is you're going to go down to change at Z, and in this case, the temperature tower that we use here, on our videos, and we have a couple of different videos on doing temperature towers, we usually change them at a 5mm layer height or 50mm layer height. And what we want to do is we want to change the extruder temperature. Every time that we want that change to take place, we want to change it right here. And first and foremost, of course, you want to set your material to the temperature that is the highest temperature on that temperature tower. So that is the way to do it. Doesn't matter what machine you're using. It really doesn't matter. You just have to do that post-processing. You'll find that under extensions once again in post-processing, and then modifying the G-code. Okay. But remember to turn all of those off before you go do your next print, because if you don't, your next print will have multiple temperatures every so many steps. Right, Brian?
Absolutely. Yep. It's you nailed it on the coffin there. Yeah. Every time if you don't enable the G code, it's going to hold the last temperature, and if you don't tell it to change, it's not going to change.
There you go. So I hope that answered your question, Nikolai, and that was the first question out of the way for today. James Lane is saying,
we haven't said hello to everybody. We got a whole list of people to say hello to.
We do. Let's go back to the top. Joseph Jolly, Larry 1980s, Rex Waldy. Let me see here. Who else we got Can 3D Print. We have Mark L. Baker, our good friend from here in Calgary. John Kitchen's here tonight. James Lane. Thomas E. 3D Obsession. I love that. Pierre is here. Sausage is here. My wife's favorite person in our chat. She just loves that name. Robert Marvin's here tonight. We've got RT, our good friend Richard Taylor. Hookie or Hockey. I always mess that one up.
I'm good with both of those.
Geraldine Ham, of course, is my wife. David Sell is here. Who else do we got? We got Ben Stanley. Trevor Rickard. And I think Guy the Jedi and Mark Thibodeau. We got a nice full room. We got people from all over tonight, which is really cool. Ben Stanley says, hello, the first layer. Have you gotten the CR6 SE on Kickstarter yet? I personally just ordered one. No, we haven't, Ben. Somehow we got shunned by Creality on that one. And it was a little bit of a stab, I felt. But we got shunned, and no, we don't have it. So we'll do what we do.
Let's put it this way. We haven't lost sleep over, compared to the models we already have. I don't think there's enough of changes on it for us to go out of pocket and purchase the machine. It's over $500 Canadian, and I think we can have a bit more fun on the channel with a couple other machines that we've seen on the market / potentially coming in, and more on that as it comes up, really.
Yeah. Larry 1980s, he says he's got a question here about a BL Touch. He bought the V1, bought the wrong BL Touch because my board is a CR-10S and the V2.1. So would that work? Yes, it will work. It's the exact same BL Touch. You just need longer wires. That's pretty much all you need. It will work exactly the same. The V1 and the V2, the only difference between the two are longer wires, and that the V1 has all the programming stuff for the Ender 3. Other than that, they're exactly the same, so you can use it. You don't have to take it back.
Did he buy the Creality BL Touch, or is he talking about a V1 that had the metal pin? Either way, the BL Touch configuration-wise is 100% the same, especially with the new versions of Marlin. When version 3 came out, there was a couple programming changes that they had to adapt for, but I have not seen any flags that says define BL Touch V2 or V1, so you should be good.
Yeah, you should be fine. James Lane, I wanted to read this one. He says, when I was a kid, I spent hours making a model rocket, but when it was launched, it went so high and so far that I lost sight of it on the descent. Never did find it. I was very upset kid that day. One of mine went into trees, and there was no way I was climbing a pine tree to get it out of there.
Those were never fun.
No, never fun. Trevor's got a quick question here. He says, what is it here? Quick question for you all. Do you want to know why my 3D printer is hitting my thing that I am trying to print while I'm printing it? Well, yeah, we'd like to know why it's doing that. And my I guess my summation, or I would surmise that something is happening. I think maybe you might be having a little bit of drop in your Z, and that could be a voltage thing if it's hitting it. Also check to see how much crap is on your nozzle, because if there's too much crap on your nozzle, that'll grab it as well. So, and
you can also, if you're using an auto bed leveling system without a fade height, if your levels are misbalanced, you're going to start clipping yourself. And then I've also seen too, where if you're too close to the print bed, as you get into those higher heights, and it's able to it over extrudes basically, because there's no room to extrude it. It bubbles out, it swells up as it cools. So it all comes down to going right back down to your first layer. Make sure your bed's as level as possible. Clean your nozzle off. Print slow on that first layer. Make sure it sticks well. And then newer features, I found you can't even turn off fade height on Marlin. So if you have an ABL, fade height is there. If it's set to 0, it doesn't auto balance. But if you can set that to 10, 15 millimeters or so, it should be printing flat without any Z movement within a few layers.
That's true. Yeah. Do you want to take this next question from Phil Kinane?
Absolutely. Let me move this onto my one screen so you don't look like I'm staring off into space wondering what's going on.
Well, I
Where
do
those
that too, because
astronauts
I
are
look
right
over
now.
here where you are, and then I've got the camera right here.
Yeah, and I've got a 27-inch monitor that I'm just clearing the lid on, so you guys will get a bit of a downward shot here.
There you go.
From Phil Kinane, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. He was saying, my questions regarding a CR-10S Pro seem to be having trouble with my prints lately, and I feel it stems from bed leveling. After going through the manual bed leveling procedure, I then select the measuring option, but the nozzle never gets past the first of 25 points, so he has a 5x5 grid.
Yeah.
When the nozzle arrives at the first point, it pushes the bed down by about 5 millimeters or more. It then returns to the center and then back to the first point, retries 3 times before producing a machine failure error message, at which point he has to restart the machine. I have the latest TM firmware. Is that manufacturer firmware? I'm not familiar with which TM firmware it is. Well, what you're seeing there is the reason it drives further into the bed is because the sensor is not detecting the bed. So if you're using this, it sounds like it's a modified firmware, and if that's the case, your grid is good, but you're probably a little too close to the outside edges of that bed. And as a result, there's not, I believe that one has a capacitive sensor, does it not, on the CR-10S Pro?
Yes, it does.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So if it's a little too close to the edge, it may not be detecting enough capacitance, and it drives into the bed. There's a failsafe in Marlin where it says if it's this much distance away from its homing point, then the bed leveling has failed. So what you're seeing is instead of it continuously crashing till the end of time, it goes and says, whoa, that's a little too far for that corner, goes and restarts and tries 3 times, to which it times out. So there's a mesh inset setting. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me here. Look for mesh inset within Marlin, and there's a setting that and it basically defines how far in from your exterior boundaries you want to go. So at a minimum, it should be the distance away from your nozzle. I like to do roughly 50 versus the 20, and then there's features such as extrapolate beyond grid to assume what it is towards the outside edges. Richard, I don't know if your opinion varies on that one, but I prefer the closer inset myself.
No, my opinion doesn't vary at all on that. You've hit that right on the head, and I think that's the best way to go about it, to be perfectly honest with you.
So just for people's reference, I refer to a capacitive sensor. There's 2 bed leveling sensor type. Well, there's 3, but nobody uses infrared anymore. I'm sorry. There's 2 types that everyone generally uses. There's the BL Touch style, where there's a physical contact within the bed that the physical contact is detected in that case via means of a magnet inside the pin. And then there's the capacitive style, which looks for a capacitance. The best way to describe this is your touchscreen cell phone has a capacitive screen. So it goes and looks for, in your case, or in our case, a finger has a capacitance measurement, and it goes and sees, okay, there's something there in that area. And the capacitive sensors are looking for, in this case, the metallic bed underneath it. If you have something like a glass bed, it will not detect the glass. It will detect the metal bed underneath. So if you do inset it and you're having a few issues, I've told people, consider something like taking a sheet of tin foil and lay it underneath your bed. Try to create a higher capacitance of that bed, and that will increase the likelihood of it being detected. Bit of a long-winded answer.
Yeah.
And I know the viewer numbers are dropping,
But it's the right answer.
Yes, it's kind of it's anything 3D printing, especially bed leveling, is quite complex in how it actually works. But when you begin to understand it, little issues like this will make a lot more sense.
All right, so Edward Hood, who is very new to 3D printing, he says, I've done test printing on the Ender 5 Pro, and they come out fine, but when printing from other files, it goes to the upper right corner as the center. That's going to be something in your slicer software. It's going to be setting in your slicer software, so I would just double check that. And then depending on what slicer you're using, just double check that, because it should be going to the center of the bed on the Ender 5 Pro. Now, there are some new profiles that are coming out. What I would do is go over to the Creality, or not the Creality, but the Cura. If you're using Cura, go over to their Facebook group and see if somebody's got something for the Ender 5. That would be your best bet, I think. Brian?
No, I absolutely agree. And one tip I'm going to give you guys that I'm trying to load up Cura as quickly as I can here is that Cura also has the ability to read G-code files. And so I'm just going to see if I can get, let's see if I got something on my desktop here for you guys to look at. Junction deviation buffer test, speed mount. That might look okay. Let's have a look here.
Let me give you the full screen.
Yeah, I will transition over to Cura. We'll see if this opens rather quick for you guys. But you can open up a G-code in Cura regardless of which application has generated it. And one of the benefits of this is that you can actually go through and look at all the movements and preview what your printer is going to do. So in this case, obviously we have no time estimation, but what we can see is we actually have a bunch of travel moves, and we have our skirt and brim, and everything's actually quite well defined. So what you can look at is see where it's traveling. So if you open up that G-code file, you might see one of these purple lines going out to the corner, which says that your slicer has told the printer to go all the way out there. Now, as we can see with my one, it actually starts off at the beginning, and I'll see if we can zoom in here. Close lovely Cura dialogues, don't tell anything. On the right-hand side of your screen, you've got a slider that if we actually look at the main model, this defines the layer number. So if we go all the way down to layer 1 and we pull the bottom slider all the way back to the beginning, this is your beginning of your G-code, and as you pull that slider or hit play, you'll see it simulate your nozzle movements. So if we zoom out and hit play on this one, we'll see it drew my line, my purge line, and then it did a dotted line for a travel over to start doing my skirt, and we're seeing the nozzle simulated moving around the bed. So this is a great way to just, if you're going to do especially a large print job, just to get an idea of how your print is going to start looking. So when I start, I like to start off with my first layer entirely drawn out so I can see, hey, am I going to have a good surface adhesion? You know, I've got a couple small little movements here, but in general, it looks like I will have a good skirt size. I believe these are tree supports here, will actually have good strength. And then you can go and scroll up and just make sure that it's going to build your model accordingly. And this is going to save you a lot of failures with your slicer so that you know exactly what your printer is going to try to do. And then if it doesn't do this, well, it's time to look into mechanics. It's time to look into firmware. So yeah, open up any G-code file just by your file open file and have a look at it and see what it looks like.
There you go. All right. So Dominic Versetto is asking, is there a rule of thumb for the right amount of squish? I bet it varies with layer height, doesn't it? By the way, I'm 70s, so I don't see too well. Well, it all depends, first of all, on the material that you're using. I know that when you use PETG, you don't want as much squish as you would with PLA or ABS. So, yes, that does play a significant role in it, but the short answer is if you've got just that little bit of drag when you do your bed level, if you just get that little bit of drag on the paper underneath the nozzle and between the bed, make sure, of course, that they're both heated up to temperature before you do re-level the bed. Then you should be right in that neighborhood, and everything should print just fine.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like to do too is with my skirts and brims, take a look if you can, even with a microscope, or not really a microscope, but a magnifying glass, and take a look when it's doing that first layer of the skirt, because the skirt should be nice and flush up each layer to each other. If you're seeing blobbing or swelling, you know that you're a little too close. If you're seeing gaps in between your lines, you're too far away, and that usually gets you pretty close. That's also how I evaluate if my bed leveling was functioning or if it failed properly, because you'll see a difference in that skirt across the bed. And you're going to save a lot of material. I don't recommend ever turning off any of them, I say either have a brim, a skirt, or a raft, but don't have none.
All right, so let's go on to a question from Joe Mueller. He says, "G'day, you probably get this question a lot. My first layer is all ripply, but the thing is, after the second or third layer, it seems to fix itself. There are some photos I took to show you, and we have those photos. Brian, can you bring those up?"
Let's see if I can bring one of them up here. Stand by. I keep talking. I will save
Okay.
it, and I will replace my video image with it.
So he says, "I have everything clean, so my settings, and does the PLA get moisture in it? The PLA has been sitting out for about 3 months. I hope you can help." And this is Joe from Australia, Joe Mueller. Now, when I look at the pictures here on my screen,
I'm just going to screen share.
I know exactly what's happening here. Yeah, let me just open this up.
Da-da-da-da.
There you go. So what I'm seeing here is the ripply lines you're getting, you're just a little bit too close to the bed here. So what's happening is when the nozzle is going from point to point, it's still hot. So it's grabbing that little edge of the material that it previously laid down, and it's grabbing it and it's just pulling it up a little bit. So the way to do that is just tweak your bed just very, very slightly, and that will go away, or it will significantly reduce, because this is exactly what's happening here. You are a little bit too close to the bed. And I can see, based on the lines and the little bit of jaggedy that you have around the edge of your lines, that you're just a little bit too close to the bed.
Especially, and this is something you notice when dealing with printers that don't have linear advance or any of those features. What you're going to see is you're always going to see the blobs here towards the end of lines or towards the start of a directional change, and that's just based off how the material flows. Because your printer at the very beginning of a line is going to have some excess pressure, which sometimes will blob out, sometimes will not, will actually show as an air gap. And then as it runs, you're going to have consistent pressure. And then towards the end, even though your extruder has stopped moving, you're going to have filament under pressure in your nozzle unless you're doing a retraction after every single move, which you're never going to want to do.
No.
So what this kind of, it looks more, the best way to describe it, it looks almost like a snow plow.
Yep.
If you're going and plowing snow back and forth and you're moving and you're trying to go too low and you can't move your snow quick enough, you're going to get your brims along the edge of each line. And then it's going to you have to go and either do a different pass to remove some of that excess, or you're going to have build up more and more. And it's a perfect example of being too close is that, as you mentioned, you're seeing it on every single nozzle pass.
Mm-hmm.
So at least your bed leveling looks good. You just have to, judging by that red light, it's a BL touch. I think you need to get a little bit of baby stepping and just step it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. I would agree with that 100%. 3D Maker Kid saying, I've always found that PETG needs more squish than PLA.
Ooh, okay, I'll tell you why. Because that's what we call cheating. PETG requires more squish because your bed's not getting hot enough, and as a result, it's not sticking unless it's so tight that you're basically dragging hot molten PETG across that bed surface in an attempt to catch. And don't get me wrong, PETG is one of the toughest filaments I've had to work with on printing, and it wasn't until I got a good, ironically, hairspray actually works really good for PETG for me. But glue stick, I find it's too hot. It gets all gunked up. You do have to change your bed adhesion method, I find, for PETG. So
I've never
if you're
had
finding
that
it's
problem,
not sticking, really?
Yeah, I've never had the problem. So,
but you're how fast are you printing too? That might
I
affect
print
it too.
at roughly anywhere between 40 and 50 millimeters per second. So I'm
wow,
fairly
really?
slow. Yeah.
Huh. No, that's fast for me. I found it didn't stick at 15, so I don't know. Maybe that's an experiment to go with and see what I screwed up.
Well, we're going to give James Lane a big hand for jumping in there and helping out Edward Hood, asking more questions, getting a little bit more in-depth into the problem that he was having. There's a big hand for James Lane, helping out Edward Hood. Thank you very much, James.
We always appreciate we're a community, and we always say this is a bit of an opinion show because we're not always 100% right, but we do have it. We all have different experiences, and we all love to share the knowledge. And with that, outside of the show, you should always come and join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/the first layer, where we have a great community of people always talking about different designs. And, we don't censor anything unless it's extremely vulgar or just outright offensive, I guess. But so if you want to go and badmouth some printer, and every time I've seen someone badmouth it, there's 10 people that jump in and say, let's work on making your printer work. So
Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, come check us out. We have a great community. A lot of you in the chat tonight are already a part of there, and that's why we can pull out these names like, oh, I've seen you around and all that. So thanks for coming out, guys, and post your prints there. I showed Big Ugly this week of the heat melting because it's kind of fun. So I love to see all your prints because everything I do seems to melt.
Well, this is something that's coming up in 2 weeks, speaking of printing. And for anybody that can see that, I think that's focused pretty good. This is, of course, the lovely Naomi Wu. This is a model that she has over on My Mini Factory that's free to download. And this was done on a printer we've got coming out on a review here pretty soon, so you guys want to watch for that. I'm really digging this little printer. It's a pretty cool little thing, and I'm now getting really into resin. So it's a mess. It's a pain in the butt, but at the end of the day, you can get some spectacular results. So
Yeah, resin is. If we go back to the whole concept of 3D printing, which is rapid prototyping, resin has really changed the game for that. I mean, PLA, sure, we can print on FDM until the cows come home, all that awesome stuff. But when it comes to dimensional accuracy and doing prototypes for molding and all that, this resin is so much fun, and I'm really loving the competition out on the market. So stay tuned for our resin videos coming up. I'm sure you'll be impressed with the results as much as we are.
Yeah, we've done a few resin printers on this show now, and there's only more coming. And we've been working with different companies as of late, and there's a lot more coming. Let me see here. We have one from TC Pittman 35. He says, "Hi guys, just started. I'm completely new to this flashing firmware thing on the SKR Mini E3 V1.2. Do I only put the firmware.bin on the SD card? Yes. Only put the firmware.bin on the SD card. If there are any files on the SD card currently, get rid of them. And just that would be your best way to do it. Then just go ahead, just transfer that new bin file over and then flash it to your card. That's the best way to do it.
And your quick lesson on this is that the SKR boards in particular are a little bit funny with these firmware updates. So put the firmware.bin on the SD card, make sure the printer's powered off, plug it in, boot it up, give it some time. Wait for it to show its new boot message and make sure that it has taken the new firmware. Then immediately remove that SD card and delete that firmware.bin.
Yep.
There are other 32-bit boards which handle it properly. I cannot explain yet what's going on with the STM chips, but they don't properly delete that file. And if you do not delete that file, every time you power cycle your printer, it's going to reflash that firmware and potentially erase all the settings you've changed, including your bed leveling, fade height. It's an absolute nightmare. So just be sure to delete it. If it's done correctly, you will still have a file called firmware.cur, but you can also delete that file too, because the flashing actually flashes the printer firmware. It doesn't do the old SD card method. So just delete anything called firmware on the SD card once your flash is working. If you put in your SD card and the flash fails, namely you have nothing come up on the screen, it's pretty much not going to be your firmware.bin file. It's actually an issue with SD card corruption, and we'll go through that in a future video about the little bugs and tips and tricks to get flashing properly. But on average, for me, every third or fourth flash fails before I have to check my SD card. And that's with a good SanDisk card. That's not even the El Cheapo it comes with. So
I never use the El Cheapos. The only time I ever use those is just to flash firmware. And then I just throw them in a bin somewhere.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah, have an SD card just for firmware flashing. Yeah. I like it.
Asher Rives, I'm sure I said that right. Just started 3D printing, and I have an Ender 3, and when I print, the filament globs up on the side of the nozzle, and sometimes when it does come down, it won't adhere to the bed. Help! Well, this is what this show is all for, is for helping you. I'll tell you exactly.
You're not the first one to experience that.
Yeah,
we've all experienced that too.
We've all experienced it at one time or another. I'm going to say two things are happening. You're either a little bit too close to the bed, and I know that you've said in a comment further down that you've leveled the bed perfectly, but you could be a little bit too close to that nozzle. The other thing that can happen is if you are too close to that nozzle, it can actually spit it out and actually damage that brass nozzle. It can actually file it off if you're using that bed adhesion method that comes with the Ender 3, which is sort of that build tack type surface. It can almost sand it at a little bit of an angle. And if it does that, of course, then your exit hole for your filament is no longer square to the actual tool. So that could be what's happening. Is it curling up? Like if you lift it up, is it curling up when it comes out, or is it dropping straight down? That's something that we need to know to be able to diagnose that a little bit better.
But yes, as you said, raise your Z and extrude a little bit and look at the nozzle. If it's changing direction, if it's doing anything other than coming straight down, there is something, either the brass is rubbed or there's a minute little clog, and it's causing the direction to change. You could also be running a little hot too. I've noticed that the nature of the filament, it does like to curl when it's too hot. And
he says
if your bed is not hot enough, and I've found even cleaning the nozzle sometimes is enough, because it could catch some filler portion of your filament and just start wrapping around itself, because the filament is going to seek out heat, right? So if you're too close, curling, there's a lot of little things down there going on. So that's probably the easiest diagnostic, is raise it and flow and make sure it comes out straight.
John Kitchen, he says, gonna try ABS, same squish as PLA or PETG. Yeah, it pretty much is. Just make sure that if you are using an open air printer, John, that you put something over top to keep that ambient air in. A box will even do. You don't have to get fancy with it. You can just put a cardboard box over top.
Just be smart, unlike that guy who nearly burnt down his house with the garbage bag over top of it. Yeah. It's bear in mind, PETG, ABS, these sort of filaments like to cool slowly. They do not like to cool rapidly like PLA. So turn off that part cooling fan, turn up that bed, and slow her down.
Yep, I agree.
And you'll have good results. I haven't done ABS probably in 2.5 years since I had my Monoprice Mini and I threw it in a Rubbermaid bucket. But make sure it's able to cool slowly. PETG can be done without a chamber. ABS really does need that chamber.
There you go. Trevor Rickards has one more question. He says, as for all, how is your wife liking the Monoprice? My girlfriend was debating on getting one. My wife absolutely loves that little Monoprice Cadet. It has not moved off of her desk since we've done the review. She has been printing on it almost nonstop since it went on there. I haven't
even been allowed to see it.
What's that?
I haven't been able to see it.
Oh, you haven't seen the review?
No, I've seen the review, but see it in person, because she's keeping it to the side. Yeah, that's true.
You have to come to the house. True. Yeah. It's on her desk. I stole the filament holder that we were using for her, but I printed her very own today, so she can get back up and running here right away. Just remember that the filament holder that comes with it is only made for 200-gram rolls. It's not made for full rolls, so you will have to use a different filament holder. But it prints great. She hasn't had any real problems with it. Once we moved it over there, we just did a quick releveling of the bed using the sensor, and it's working fine. She loves it.
I'm upset because I don't have a spool holder and I can't make anything.
She's upset, she just said, because she doesn't have a spool holder and can't make anything.
Hey,
Well, we're
with
gonna
the size of
correct
that
for
machine, you're probably better to hand spool 100-gram rolls for her,
Yeah.
because I think it'll take a year to go through a kilo on it.
Well, not the way she prints. You think I'm bad
Yeah,
at printing.
that's true.
She prints a lot.
That's true. That's very true. And well, I mean, I print a lot of failures. I mean, I went through 6 kilos last month alone, and I got another 24 downstairs. I'm hoping they'll tie me over a couple months. But
Yeah.
see what happens when I do big prints? See, this is what happened when I do big prints.
Yeah. And leaves it out in the sun.
Hey, you know what? Here's what happened. I filled it with dirt. I filled the entire thing with dirt, and then a certain somebody said, well, empty all that dirt out and put stones in the bottom and then put the dirt in. And so I'm like, all right, I'll just leave it on the deck. I'll take care of it in the morning.
Yeah.
That's what happened overnight.
Wow.
And just so you guys know, that is only like 75 degrees, maybe, wouldn't you say, for American friends?
Yeah.
It was 20 degrees Celsius out. That, and we're pretty high north. That was just from sun exposure. So that's why you don't print outdoor PLA stuff, even though it might not get hot where you are. The sun is all it needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to remind you guys that we do have these wonderful shirts. I'm wearing mine. I print PETG. Brian's wearing his I Print PLA t-shirt tonight. These are available on shopthefirstlayer.com. The site is secure. We're using Stripe as our payment method. You can also use PayPal if you like. We are shipping them from here. They're not being shipped from Teespring or anybody else. They're being shipped from here. If you'd like to get one, they are available now. And if you go to the website, there is an offer code right on the front page. You can only use it once, but it is it's off 10 or something.
I know that they got to go to the site to check to see what
go check out
is.
the site. And you just scroll down a little bit. There's a coupon code there. You'll get 10% off your first order of one of these fine, nice, all cotton, 100% cotton t-shirts. There you go. I'm gonna just pull up Brian here once again. There you go. It's not much of a site. We only have 3 t-shirts up there right now, but every t-shirt sold.
What is it?
I don't know. You went too fast.
I know, that's the key. They got to go to the website to see it.
Every t-shirt
just be
sold,
patient with the pay.
Goes to helping us produce new content and get stuff in here for you guys to so that we can help you even more. You know, get new boards and test stuff. So there's iPrint ABS, iPrint PETG, and iPrint PLA, and they start at $19.99 and go up to $24.99. I think it's 2X and up or $24.99. They are Gildan 100% cotton, heavy cotton t-shirts, so they're definitely worth it.
Be patient with the website. We've got some loving people out there who would love to take this site down. I'm hoping it's bots.
Yeah, well, it is bots. We've had a bunch of people try to crash our site, but fortunately, I have enough security in place for us not to have that problem. So
we're secure. We're just bogged down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll take that as, hey, we're popular.
Okay, so TC Pittman 35 says, will I flash my BL Touch and TFT 35 at the same time, or do each flash separately. Your BL Touch you'll do at the same time. The TFT35 you will have to do on the TFT35, I believe. So that'll be a whole separate issue.
That's correct. The TFT35 is basically its own operating system. Mine, both my 35E3 and my TFT24, which is just hanging behind me, is still running the original shipped firmware. It does work fine. Just be careful when you flash those firmwares, and make sure you read the community groups, the Big Tree Tech one on Facebook. I've heard there's been missing icons and updates and so forth, but unless you're looking for a new feature or you got a bug, just leave it the way it is. It works fine out of the box. The BL Touch flash will go, of course, on your main board flash for your printer. All of the programming of the BL Touch actually happens through Marlin firmware.
There we go. James Lane says, I've done ABS without an enclosure and in the middle of summer with no air conditioning on, but it was a real pain in the butt, frequently lifting and curling up at the corners. An enclosure is needed. Absolutely. I've said it a million times. When you're printing with ABS, you really need an enclosure because it is so susceptible to temperature changes in the room. And if you don't have it, that would definitely cause a problem. Speaking of James Lane, he's our last question of the night too. You want to take this?
There we go. Yeah, absolutely. Let me. Where did I? Got too many windows open. This is always my problem.
I have that problem.
There
too.
we go. All right. The Big Tree Tech SKR Mini E3 V1.2, one of the longer names I've read out there. Control board from Biku, who is also Big Tree Tech, if you guys didn't know, has been a popular upgrade for several printers, including the Ender 3. Absolutely, it has. Recently, they've released a newer version, the Mini E3 2.0, with even more features. What are your thoughts between the differences between the original 8-bit 1X mainboard? So we'll talk about the silent mainboard to kind of classify it in the same range. The SKR Mini E3 1.2 and the Mini E3 V2.0. What do you consider to be core pros and cons of each?
Wow.
Well, I guess we can start off with talking about 1.2 versus 2.0. They've basically rehashed the board, incorporated a lot of the community feedback on the board features, changed out a few components. This is kind of the evolving board design. So my answer, the 1.2 is very well established, and if that's the most readily available board, I don't see any reason for you to jump on the 2.0 bandwagon. But if you have the opportunity to get the 2.0, go ahead and grab it. Now, Richard, maybe you've worked more with the Mini E3 compared to the original Creality boards.
I've worked actually with the dip more than the Mini.
Oh, have you now?
Yeah,
okay, because
the dip I've worked with more than the Mini, and I like the dip over the Mini just because it has removable stepper drivers. I don't have the Mini in front of me, or the dip, but this is a Big Tree board right here.
Yeah, the SKR one.
Yeah, this is the SKR 1.3, I think. Yeah. Yeah, 1.3. So this one, you can see it has separate steppers on it. And this one is configured for UART. So this one has UART stepper drivers on it, just like the dip, E3 dip. Yeah, I think it's a dip E3 or E3 dip. It has E3 removable steppers. So you can use 2209s on it. You can use 2208s on it. And you can get that UART functionality out of it. This is why I like the dip, because if one of these goes, you're going to know about it right away, because it's going to give you a TMC error on your screen, and then you can just figure out which one it is by going in and typing in some M commands and finding out exactly which one of these is gone, and then it's just a simple matter of replacing it. So that would be my summation of it, or my suggestion to you. As far as the 2.0 goes, yes, it does have some better features, but it also still has, if I'm not mistaken, it still has the built-in stepper drivers. So if one of them goes, that board's toast. So you got to replace the whole board. So I prefer the dip over the Mini, just because I have more control over what stepper drivers I put on there. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, though, that being said, if you are doing an Ender 3 upgrade, the Mini E3 is actually, it's a nice board as long as you follow the proper instructions. You will, with any product, you're always risking getting a bad component, right? Whether it's Big Tree Tech or even some of the bigger companies. I'm trying to remember the Duets. Even the Duets, you could get a bad Duet or you could smoke a chip. So the E3 Mini is nice. It does. I have seen a couple of chip failures with the steppers, but I haven't evaluated one to see if it's a result of the board design or if it's simply that people are installing them in Ender 3s and that little fan on the case is not sufficient to cool those chips effectively. Right. Now, talking about the E3 dip a lot, the E3 dip, the only difference between the dip board and that Mini is those removable steppers. Every other configuration, including its drop-in for a CR10, Ender 3, it's all the same. Just by default, they ship it with TMC, I believe 2208, but you can configure it for SPI or standalone. So I've got one board that runs Lairge LV8729s, and I've got another one that actually runs a couple of 5160s, a much more expensive stepper that requires no cooling. The board has been an absolute solid one for me. The chip has its ups and downs, but I'm starting to work my way around those. I would have preferred the ones that are on the SKR boards. However, the SKR board is not a drop-in replacement for the Creality printers. So the TLDR is, I would prefer it if people bought the E3 dip for flexibility in the future. However, the Mini E3 is still a much better value than the Creality silent board.
I agree 100%. There's a question here from Mark Thibodeau. He says, when using PETG, are the fumes toxic? If so, what do you do to get rid of the fumes looking at using PETG? Now, PETG, like any other plastic, is going to give off some odor. Even PLA gives off some odor. And they all put micro particulates into the air. Now, is PETG bad for you? I have not had that issue. I've not had any breathing issues around it, and I have breathing issues. I suffer from bronchitis chronically, so that's why I don't smoke anymore. I don't even vape. But yeah, you can have different levels of toxicity with different plastics. PETG, to me, it smells like popcorn. And I have all my printers in a separate room. The only ones here in the studio right now are the resin printers, but at the end of the day, the resin is a lot stronger odor than PETG is. And even with the low odor resins, I still smell it. So I would say that you're pretty safe with PETG. You don't have to have it in a separate room. You don't have to vent it outside in any way, shape, or form. If you're doing a long print, then I'd probably, put it in a room, like an office or somewhere that you're not in all the time. And if you're going to print PETG regularly, then that's probably what I would do. So how do you feel about that, Bri?
I'm always a fan of, if you can ventilate, even if it's passive ventilation, then go for it. You shouldn't be sticking it into a closet, then proceeding to print for 4 days, open it up and stick your head right in. That's just not smart. Just as if you're working with a cleaning chemical in your bathroom. If you close that door with no ventilation and you let it build up and you get in there, you could do some damage. But even leaving the door open for a few minutes and letting it disperse amongst your house is enough for it not to be a concern. Now, I'm not going to speak on the toxicity of filament or of 3D printing because there's a lot of controversial science coming out. And the fact is, nobody has hard figures. So I play on the err on the side of safety. I'm not sticking my head inside the printer and staring at it all hours. I bought a camera to do that. I try to keep it in open spaces or in spaces where there's a lot of personal movement. So I have a couple printers here in the office. I've got a couple in my front foyer where there's a lot of airflow, and I've got one in the kitchen because it's so bloody big. But I don't ever put them in a small, tight, enclosed space. If you're printing with ABSs where you build an enclosure, I always advise, as soon as you're done printing, go and open up the door to your chamber, make sure that's in a room that can ventilate, and let it air out for a bit. Don't stick your head in there, because sticking your head in there and sniffing will do probably thousands of prints of equivalent of particulates on you. As for filtration, I have not seen enough studies to see if there is an approved filtration method that would filter it out, that wouldn't cost you a small fortune. We're talking scientific lab filtration. So we'll have to wait and see as studies come out. But as of right now, it's, again, play on the side of caution. I've never heard of anybody having any long-term or even short-term health issues as a result of inhaling it. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medic. I'm not going to tell you to do something stupid.
We're not scientists. We just play ones on the internet.
Yes. Mad scientist, Doc Brown.
Yes. Alteracious, or no, not alteracious. I'm sorry. Pierre, question, what would be the difference between UART and the other one, or non-UART? I'm going to let you tackle this one because you've got more of the technical explanation than I do.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it a little brief here, but UART is universal asynchronous receiving and transmitting, if I recall correctly. Yeah. UART is the generic term for RS-232 serial communications. And before I talk about SPI, I want to give an awesome shout out to Sausage because we got a super chat. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Sausage, for the super chat. We do appreciate that.
I think you were trying to get that working last time, so good to see you got it working.
Oh, yeah, it's working now. It was working last week, too.
Was it?
Yep.
Oh, it was someone else said the super chat wasn't working for them with their credit card, but we appreciate all the little kickbacks. It does help out. That'll buy me 1/6 of a roll of filament.
You know what? We can each get coffee at McDonald's.
Oh, there you go. Sausage use PayPal. Hey, I didn't know you could link up PayPal with YouTube. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, that'll pay for my coffee digging up the yard tomorrow. So getting back to our communication topic there, SPI is the other communication method, which stands for Serial Peripheral Interface. And it's a more developed, shall I say, version of a serial communication where you have a clock signal and you have a chip select. And what SPI allows you to do is daisy chain multiple serial devices and only have a singular communication path forward and backwards between one master and multiple slaves. UART is designed for end-to-end, so one stepper to one chip now, or one port. The reason SPI going forward is the better method is, simply put, it's less wires. You have a chip select wire for each stepper, and then you have a single serial bus versus having send and receive for every single chip on the line. So SPI, you'll see this a lot more in high speed and commercial applications. UART is just kind of legacy. It goes, as I said, back to serial port days, and it's gone way beyond the RS-232 spec. Is there a benefit in the 3D printing realm versus UART versus SPI? Apart from a board designer, it makes no difference. I've got actually a blend of UART and SPI chips on my machine downstairs, and really it just comes down to whatever the heck Trinamic tells me I have to use.
Yeah, and I use the UART on my Ender 3, and I just actually upgraded that board from the stock board because I was having a problem. It was having a problem reading consistently the thermistor, which I know is good. So once I upgraded the board, I have no problem anymore. Neuro. So last question of the night. Question about the SKR 1.4 board. Is the dual Z support still broken? As far as I know, yes.
I'll have to dig into it because I have an SKR 1.4 turbo downstairs waiting to go into a machine, and that feature kind of excited me. So if that doesn't work, I'm either going to have to go back to my splitter method, or I might try to use that additional extruder motor port as a secondary Z and play with that Z alignment tool in Marlin. But as far as I knew, I thought the Z stepper just split out the wires. I didn't think there was anything special on that.
You could use the extra on the 1.4 board. You could use the extra E1 port as a secondary stepper driver for the Z, and you just change that in the firmware. However, it did have some. I think there were some voltage issues with it. that it wasn't sending correct voltage, even if you put a splitter on it. For
Really
whatever reason.
now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what the problem was.
I'll tell you guys from my experience, whenever I'm dealing with a Z motor right now with a dual Z, I'm either putting a TMC 2209 on it or a 5160.
Yeah.
The reason is the TMC 2208, as much as it's a good chip for driving a single stepper, it gets to the upper boundaries of what the chip can handle when you want to drive dual Z off that. And I had my 2208 as high as 1200 milliamps, or I guess it's 1.2 volts. The terminology is all over the map. I was running at the max end of the chip, and I was actually seeing some skips on the Zs. And I switched it to the 2209, which actually increases its power potential up to 1.6 amps. So it's actually quite a big upgrade if you can get the 2209 over the 2208. That gave me a lot more help. And then I just had a spare 5160, which can handle something stupid like 5.2 amps.
Yeah.
But the benefit with that chip, of course, is since it can handle so much, when you run a lower power, it doesn't even require a cooling heatsink on it. So I've got that for my Z right now. It doesn't, now my steppers actually start to warm up around the 1200 range, so I know it's getting the appropriate amount of power. So I'm going to dig into that 1.4 turbo board a little bit here. That's eventually going to be the main driver of my CR-10S V, and I hope to get back to you and see what I can learn about this newly heard of Z issue that I wasn't aware of until 5 minutes ago.
All right. So if you guys are looking to send us questions, because we are at the end of tonight's show, you can always send your questions to questions@thefirstlayer.com. Remember that these are the questions that we go by first, and then questions that come in through chat are secondary. If you want to get your question to the top of the queue, of course, you can use Super Chat. That always helps us out, and it helps you to get your question answered a little faster. Coming up this Wednesday, we are going to be going into our first video on rockets, 3D printed rockets. These are the Estes style rockets. So they use the Estes style motors in the back. You put a parachute in them, you send them up, and we are going to try them in, well, I've got this one is in PET G. Then I have another one, which is in a matte black from filaments.ca. This is the EcoTough PLA from filaments.ca. This one just needs to have a parachute put into it. Both of them just need parachutes. And then we've got a commercial rocket from Estes that our good friends over at PM Hobbycraft helped us out with. If you're looking for any hobbies, I urge you strongly to go over to pmhobbycraft.ca. Check out what they have. They ship all over the world. Check them out today. If you're in Canada, they've got a great line of everything from RC to trains to drones to model kits, just plastic model kits. They've got a great selection, and they have some of the best selection of model kits that I've seen. And they are one of the oldest hobby shops, family-owned hobby shops, actually, in all of Western Canada. So I urge you to go check them out at pmhobbycraft.ca and, give them a little bit of love, give them some of your business if you're looking to get RC stuff. James Lane says, PM Hobbycraft is great. They always seem to have what I'm looking for. And yes, they do always seem to have what you're looking for. I want to thank everybody.
It is a fun retail space to walk through.
There you go. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
and it's changed so
that.
much. When I was in there at the top of the week, man, it's changed so much. She's actually got barbecues in there now.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And of course, he is selling the Ender 3 there, and you can get filament there as well. So I want to thank everybody tonight for joining us here on the First Layer, and hope you guys got something out of tonight. Remember to hit that like button, give us a comment down below, tell us what you thought of tonight's show. If you've got questions for us, again, remember questions@thefirstlayer.com, and we are going to see you next time right here on Wednesday when we talk about rockets, and we'll be back with you again live Saturday night next Saturday. I think you're with me, or are you not with me?
I am not with you, actually.
Okay.
I have to
You're out of town next
deal
week.
with it. Unfortunately out of town, but rest assured, guys, I will not be having fun with it. So I
So
might be trying to tune in into commenting.
there you go. So next Saturday, it's just me, no guest, no co-host. So you guys will just have to put up with me, I guess. And until next time, my friends, remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. See you next time.
See ya.